overwhelmingly failed in recent years to fulfill their international obligations in the Mediterranean. The disturbing irregularities in the investigation into the civil sea rescuers in this case, which involved wiretapping, including of lawyers and journalists, as well as public leaks of legal documents leading to smear campaigns and threats against defendants, should worry us all, as should some of the persistent fair trial concerns observed in this case, such as the lack of access to adequate interpretation and translation of case materials. While the defendants in this case had access to excellent lawyers and resources to mitigate these shortcomings, we must remember that the vast majority of people facing facilitation charges in Italian courts are actually vulnerable people on the move themselves, without the same privileges and degree of support. Although today's ruling is surely a great relief to the iuventa-crew and other defendants in this case, we must also keep in mind that the long legal saga against them represents one part of a larger alarming trend in criminalizing civil sea rescue and other forms of solidarity with people on the move. Such solidarity is a vital form of human rights defense that should be actively protected and promoted, not criminalized. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the floor over now to our 4 speakers, and then after that, we'll open up for a Q&A. The speakers are going to be Sasha Gurka from the iuventa-crew, one of the defendants in this case, as well as Nicola Canestrini and Francesca Cancellaro, both lawyers for the iuventa defendants in the case, and then Elisa De Pieri from Amnesty International's Europe Regional Office and a member of the Trial Observation Group. So, Sasha, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Alison, and welcome everyone. We at the iuventa-crew, as the defendants in this case, we are welcoming today's decision, but we have to express profound concerns over the damages already caused by the investigation and the trial. As a result of a sloppy investigation driven by political motives, thousands of people have died in the Mediterranean, or been forcibly returned to war-torn Libya. The iuventa, had it not been seized, could have made an important contribution to their rescue. Instead, our ship was left to wreck, and we were dragged into a trial that lasted for years. Vast resources were mobilized against us, anti-mafia prosecution and special police units were deployed against sea rescuers. And since 2016, this entire operation has been used to legitimize the increasing crackdown on sea rescue efforts. But none of the allegation could stand up. And that's the point where we relieved on. The prosecution relied on untrustworthy witnesses who were driven by personal interests and political agendas. All was based on a rather acrobatic hypothesis about the alleged cooperation between us and smuggling networks. On this basis, the seizure of the iuventa should have never happened, and certainly not the indictment against us. But there was no will to protect and support this urgently needed civil fleet where we were a part of. On the contrary, a political trial developed to prevent such solidarity efforts. One of the outcomes is a years-long campaign of denunciation was fueled with the aim to delegitimize the civil fleet and other solidarity networks with people on the move. In the end, millions of euros were pumped into this shameful investigation, and we accused had to spend enormous resources and time to defend ourselves. But the greatest damage is the damage that is irreparable. Since 2016, the year of the seizure, more than 10,000 people lost their life at sea, and more than 200,000 people were illegally pulled back to the war-torn Libya, where we all know that they are exploited, abused, and killed. This trial was not only made possible on made possible on the basis of the European Facilitators Package and the national jurisdiction in Italy. It's the Article 12 of the Italian Immigration Act. And these provisions, they allow and they encourage the criminalization of solidarity amongst and towards people on the move. And the result is the mass detention of migrants and people on the move and the embargoing of rescue efforts. In order, and that's what we are calling out from today, in order to prevent the history of the iuventa from being repeated, and in order to prevent thousands of people on the move from disappearing into prisons of Europe, simply because they help themselves and others to obtain their right to seek for asylum, these laws must be abolished. And nevertheless, the solidarity movements are not deterred. Despite the harsh sanctions imposed by the Italian authorities and the violent and often life-threatening interventions of the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, there are still people who continue to go out to sea to save people from drowning or from the brutal consequences of being returned to Libya. And we, the iuventa-crew, we are also not intimidated by this trial either. The iuventa and its crew will return to rescue missions as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sasha. Nicola, I pass it over to you.
Yes, thanks a lot. Today, the court acquitted all the defendants of this trial, and the seizure of the iuventa was lifted. The acquittal of the court was the most favorable for the defendants because the court stated that the charges had no factual background. Iuventa, the crew, they were prepared when they went on sea to risk the seizure of their ship, to risk to be arrested, to risk jail time. But they thought that it would have been the Libyan authorities to do this. And they would never have thought that Italy, which has had a long-standing tradition in upholding human rights, would do that to them. The sea rescue, today's decision recognizes that sea rescue is not a crime, but it is a duty and a right. This investigation against iuventa has been an example throughout these years for how the NGOs were put on the same table as the human traffickers. This trial has been used in the political narrative, and not only in the political narrative, to show that there were evidence for the collaboration between NGOs and sea traffickers. What we hope is that today's decision will be a landmark case in defending the activity of sea rescue, even in the future, to defend the right to solidarity against Italian and EU policies regarding migration. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicola. Now, Francesca.
Thank you. I would like to say that today was an important starting point in the process of the decriminalization of solidarity. I consider it a starting point because I think that there is so many things to do, so many struggles to carry out. So this is the beginning. Through the iuventa case, we raised so many issues about the disproportionality of the discipline at the European level. I'm talking about the facilitators package, and at the national level. And now I'm talking about Article 12 of the Immigration Act. For these reasons, we started through the iuventa-crew in open a debate, a public debate that was based on the research and on a debate that was within the courtrooms, but also outside courtrooms. And starting from this, we also filed a constitutional complaint and that raised the illegitimacy of this discipline that was the cause since the beginning of such a kind of criminalization in Italy and in Europe. For these reasons, we think that also next steps will be important in order to change such a kind of discipline, in order to ask at national and supranational level to say important words in order to prevent such a kind of criminalization. For these reasons, I'm really looking forward to having the result of the case, the Kinshasa case, that will be bring before the Court of Justice the disproportionate of the European and the national discipline, because they are in contrast with the protection of fundamental rights of both defendants, potential defendants, and people on the move themselves. So as was already mentioned, all of this stays together, and we have to consider all of these part of the very same scheme. So when we talk about the decriminalization, we can of course count now on a very important precedent, which is the precedent that we obtained today at the Trapani court. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Francesca. Now, Elisa.
You're still muted.
Good afternoon. It gives me great joy to be part of this moment today. It has been a very long time coming. I have checked my records, and Amnesty's earliest email exchange with members of Jugendrettet and iuventa-crew dates back to the 7th of August 2017, days after the ship Juventa had been seized. As anybody working to support refugees and migrants in and around Europe knows, these have been tough years with European states engaging in blatant violations of human rights at land and sea borders and implementing cruel policies of deterrence to keep people out at any cost. So days like this are precious. I am relieved that this ordeal is over for Dariush, Catherine, Sasha, and Uli, and for the others human rights defenders of MSF and Save the Children. iuventa-crew have been exceptionally resilient, not only in the way they have faced these proceedings, which could have landed them in prison for 20 years, but also in their determination to turn their trial into an act of resistance and a platform for others less fortunate and worse equipped than them to face criminalization. I am proud we have been able to support them in this, and I am happy they can finally go back to their lives, because although they have carried the weight with incredible grace, this has been a very hard time for them and has impacted their personal and work lives, not to speak about the costs. This case has required us to use all the tools in our box, from research, legal analysis, to advocacy with national authorities and international mechanisms, to public campaigning by our activists and sections, especially in Italy and Germany. For the observation, for the trial observation, teaming up with ECCHR and DDL has been I think an excellent experience, which has had an important impact on the proceedings. And we are particularly pleased to have been able to contribute to supporting iuventa-crew with the observation, because through the observation, the access that has been given by the court has set a precedent in Italy, which we hope will be carried through in other cases. I wanted to bring a few elements of reflection about the significance of this case. First, this investigation and criminal prosecution was a violation of Italy's duty to protect human rights defenders and ensure that they can operate in an environment where they are safe from the fear and of reprisals. The attention that the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders dedicated to this case cannot have left the Italian authorities in any doubt about this. We are also relieved that the court has closed the case also against MSF and Save the Children as entities, which would have constituted a really bad precedent of harassment of civil society in Italy. This investigation opened the season of criminalization of rescue NGOs using penal law. It has been the first, the longest, and most expensive investigation and prosecution against a rescue NGO, precisely because the investigation was pursued for so long and with such plenty of resources. Today's acquittal represents a victory of particular significance, and it adds to the numerous rulings of other courts in Italy and abroad, which have concluded that the accusations against individuals and NGOs who assisted refugees and migrants at sea were unfounded. However, regardless of the outcome of the proceedings, the people and organizations involved still suffered serious and largely irreparable damage. Jugendrettet had to dissolve. The Juventa ship, as we know, is a wreck, and the people involved have lived in limbo for years. And the reputation of NGOs, whose work is based on public trust, has been undermined. Other cases of criminalization of people and organizations who have worked in solidarity with refugees and migrants continue in other countries, such as Greece. We hope that today's ruling will help achieve acquittals for other human rights defenders accused of facilitating irregular migration. In light of this ruling, we need to modify the legislation on the facilitation of irregular migration at the national and European level, as the lawyers have indicated. And the need for doing that is even more evident, and Amnesty will continue to support this work to make it happen. Furthermore, it should not be forgotten that the most recent criminalization of civilian rescue at sea involves apparently administrative rules and practices, but in reality, seriously punitive ones, especially after the Cutro decree in Italy. This investigation focused on rescue at sea, and this is my last point. We were very concerned about the prosecution's attempt to reinterpret what was happening in the Central Mediterranean in 2016 and 17, as if the thousands of people on board the dilapidated boats were not really in danger. Juventa saved over 14,000 people under the coordination and within the framework of operations managed by the Italian authorities. Fortunately, the court has rejected the dangerous interpretation of the prosecution, and with the broadest formulation that there was no conduct that amounted to a crime. However, the investigation with the seizure of the Juventa ship aggravated the dangerous situation for migrants and refugees in the Central Mediterranean, where in 2023, almost 2,500 people died or disappeared at sea. By doubting the risks to life for people traveling on unseaworthy boats and fleeing the horrors of Libya, the investigation also contributed to undermining the integrity of the search and rescue system, with consequences we still see today. This is, I think, the gravest impact that this investigation has had, and we are really pleased that the court formulation of acquittal has put a lid on it, and we hope that the authorities will take notice for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Elisa, and thanks so much to all of the speakers. I'm now going to open up the floor to questions from journalists and other participants. And you can pose your questions in the Q&A function, which you find below in the menu. Please write your name and your affiliation there along with your question. And then you can pose them in either English or Italian, and we will read them out loud, myself in English and Elisa in Italian, before they get answered by whoever they're posed to. Okay, I see that we actually have some questions in the normal chat, not in the Q&A section. So I will start from there. One of the questions, which is coming from Alexandria Sage from AFP, can you please talk about the status of the other 11 defendants? The case started with 21, then it got divided, and now there are 10 today. So amongst the speakers, who wants to take that one? Perhaps Nicola?
Maybe. Yes, thanks, Alison. The investigation started against 21 defendants, but then and we had to remind that these 21 defendants were not the original one who were investigated, because Iuventa, for example, the iuventa-crew was investigated. There was an investigation against 10 of them, and then only 4 made it to the pre-trial hearing, which ended today. The other 11 defendants, the case was split up due to territorial competence in one of the hearings of last year. So the court, the defendants asked to be judged by their natural judge. The court referred the case to the Supreme Court in Rome, and the Supreme Court, during the preliminary hearing, split the case in multiple other courts. But no, this did not concern the 4 the 4 Iuventa defendants. They were stayed in Trapani, so this is final for them. The other 11 persons and defendants split all over southern Italy, depending on which port the rescue was concluded, because this was the criterion given by the Italian Supreme Court. They will face their preliminary hearings in the next month. And if I can interpret correctly what came out today from the courtroom, it would be much easier for them to have their acquittal after this decision.
Thanks so much, Nicola. The next question we have comes from Almert Siefert from EPD. He has asked, how high were the costs for the defendants and how are they paid? Yeah, you want to take that one, Sasha? Or Nicola? You two decide.
I can start. From to my knowledge, I mean, it's a long time, and we had a pile of costs and a lot of costs during the years. But I would estimate the costs for us, for the iuventa-crew, of around 800,000 euros for all the years. And we were able to pay this by all from donations. And the most of the incoming donations are small donations from friends, from comrades, from families, or people we don't know personally, but they were so in such a solidarity with us that they gave us like 10 euros every month, for example, or maybe 50 euros. There were a lot of birthday parties, collecting money and sending it to the iuventa-crew. There were a lot of concerts played, a lot of bars or other cultural centers collected money for us during the cultural events. So that's the basis of our financial support we had so far. Thanks.
Thanks. And Nicola, did you want to add on that, or?
I just wanted to say that having a trial like this is for the normal defendant impossible to defend himself or herself. What the iuventa-crew was amazing in planning. I remember we met in Potsdam, I think it was 2019 or early 2020, when we thought about strategy. And the costs were one of the problems that every defendant in Italy is going to have, even if he or she is acquitted, because the defendant has to pay himself or herself from the start. And then if he or she is acquitted, he or she could get a compensation of up to 10,000 euros each, which is not approximately the cost of a defense in such a trial, which lasted years. So usually normal defendants, they have no chance to have this kind of defense. And I'm talking about technical experts, witness experts, and something like that as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. The next question comes from Benjamin Buchholz from Hinz und Kunst. He says, I would like to know how Dariusz thinks about the end of the trial from a personal perspective. What was it like to be prosecuted for such a long time, and how relieved is he today? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I'm relieved. It makes no sense to lie on this point because, of course, it was a hard struggle for all of us, not only political wise, but also personal wise. But somehow it's a strange kind of relief because when there was imagine every day when you go to school, there's an asshole on the way to the school and he beats you up. And one day it stops that he beats you up. It's a relief, of course, but it doesn't feel like a win because somehow we lost. Somehow we lost because we lost so much money, we lost so much energy, and mainly also we were not able to do what we normally want to be because we want to be activists going out at sea and prevent that people die. And we were not able to do that in that range. We could do that without that trial. So it's a relief, but one eye is crying, one eye is laughing. No?
All right. The next question comes from Casper Surber from the WOZ. Has the court also decided whether the proceedings themselves will be investigated, in particular, the political intentions behind them?
Maybe Alison?
Yes, Nicola.
Okay. We asked the court during our final pleas to refer the case to prosecution and to clear why there were so many mistakes made during the investigation, because we wanted to check if here the investigation was flawed and the investigators intentionally put things wrong in the case file in order to have Juventa prosecuted and then go to trial. The court did not accept this request, so the court did not hand over the case file to prosecution, but we'll see if we can have better input on that place. So I don't think that the last chapter is spoken on that topic.
Thanks so much. I also see that Andrea Dernbach has a hand raised, but I don't see a question in the chat or the Q&A. So if you would like to ask that question, it would be great if you could put it there.
I'd like to. Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to know, I have to admit that I was out for 5 minutes. I couldn't avoid it. Maybe it's already been treated. Anyway, I'll try. All of you seem to be rather optimistic to campaign and to change legislation, which has been very which has been an evil during the last years. What does you make such optimistic? We've seen that pushbacks are forbidden, but they are taking place, and not only in a few cases. We have seen a lot of, we know that rescue at sea is a duty, and it was made impossible. So we have seen a strange ability of democratic states to disregard law and sentences and rules and ruling. So where does your optimism come from that things will change after this ruling?
Thanks for that question. Who wants to take it first? Maybe from the crew?
Or from the legal team, including you from ECCHR.
Okay, maybe I can take it. Well, I'm not optimistic personally. I think that this is, as I mentioned, it is a starting point of something. So I'm not optimistic in the sense that I think that everything will be fantastic from now. But I had the impression that there is at least a path. There is something that is changing, and there is an opportunity also to change some aspects of the discipline, and changing also the idea of the fact that it's not possible at all to change it. If you consider the facilitator's package, you know that this discipline was introduced in 2002, so more than 20 years ago, and still exists. So the thing is that now, for the first time, I see a chance to challenge it. I'm not saying that this is an optimistic approach. I'm saying that we have tools to fight maybe more than in the past, the very same law. And I'm not optimistic at all if I consider the legislative process at the European level for the change of this discipline either, but still, I think that opening a debate is fundamental, and trying to start thinking that it's possible step by step, trying to technically attack these disciplines. Because, of course, the political perspective was already deepened from civil society and scholars and so on. So I'm aware of it. But since now we don't have a real chance at the legal level to challenge it. So it's something new, and it's important to underline this. I'm not considering only the outcome, the final outcome of all of this, but I think that the fact that now it seems to be possible, it's already an achievement. So we'll see, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I take the opportunity to just add to that, since you addressed it also potentially to ECCHR. I think that this particular result for the iuventa-crew is yeah, an incredible relief, but more importantly, the struggle continues. This is one example in a much broader troubling trend that we see in Europe of criminalization and repression across the EU against people on the move and those in solidarity with them. So I think that what we see today, the defense lawyers have spoken about some of the examples now from Francesca. The defense lawyers were able to launch some really key challenges within the course of this case, and we see the reverberations of that elsewhere. But yeah, this is not naive optimism. Obviously, the struggle continues, but I think that this case has really shown what can be accomplished when lots of different groups and lots of different struggles are coming together. Yeah. Do any of you from the crew want to answer that one, or should we move to the next?
Yeah, maybe I can add just from our point of view. We hope, and it's I think it's the messages we received not only today but also during the last years from our colleagues, from our comrades and friends, is that also with a different outcome of this trial, to be honest, even if today it would have not been such a positive outcome, the struggle would have continued anyway. But with this positive decision today, it lifts up a bit the spirit, and it gives some hope, not in the justice of the system, and that now Italy will change their approach radically, but at least it's a symbolic win, of course, because the trial was always a reason, it was always an argument for a further crackdown on sea rescue. So it was always said, yeah, but there is the iuventa trial still ongoing. So, and this trial is a symbol, is a, there you can see that sea rescuers and criminal networks are working together. And today it was said clearly by the judge that there was no crime at all. And so we hope that all these arguments brought against us, fueling this smear campaign and denunciation against sea rescuers and solidarity networks and movements with people on the move, are today yeah, a bit more silent, and that the other voices who were calling for years that this trial is baseless and that solidarity can never be crime, that they becoming a bit more louder. That's my perspective.
Thanks. So I will move on to the next question. We have a follow-up from Almut Siefert from EPD, who wants to add on to the previous question for Nicola. So the question is, there will be no compensation from the authorities apart from the mentioned 10,000 euros per person.
Yes. If the defendants ask for the compensation, they may be able, through very bureaucratic procedure, to get this money in the next 3 years. But regarding the fact to have been subject to an 8 years long investigation, because the investigation started in 2016, we became aware of it in 2017 when the ship was seized in August 2017. But to have been subject to such a lengthy investigation and to such pressure during the trial, this is not going to be compensated at all.
All right, the next question is from Clemens from Mission Lifeline, who asks, will we see the Iuventa back at sea?
Of course, we would love to sail out with the Iuventa tomorrow, but 7 years or 6 years rotting in the harbor give some, we need to repair it, and we have to evaluate how much money it will cost. And even if the court has to pay it or the Italian state has to pay it because they damaged it, maybe it makes no sense to spend so much money to repair this old ship. But of course, if it's possible and if it's manageable and if it's not totally out of any sense how much it will cost, we will repair the ship and we will sail out as soon as possible, because still every day there are people in distress at sea and it's needed that we go out.
All right, that was the last question that I had in the chat, actually. But I ask you one more time, if there are any additional questions, please to put them in the Q&A. All right, I don't see any more coming in. So as I mentioned before, the recording of this will be available later. You can contact the email of press@solidarity@sea for any additional questions or interview requests. And thanks.